There is a vault somewhere inside the ancient infrastructure of the British monarchy that contains roughly 19 million pounds, a collection of historically significant jewelry, and the last financial lifeline available to Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. And the woman holding the only key to that vault has absolutely no intention of opening it. Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, has done something that would have been unthinkable even 5 years ago. She has drawn a clear, public, and permanent line between the institution she has served for over 5 decades and the two people she believes have spent the last several years trying to dismantle it from the outside. This is not a family disagreement playing out in whispered corridors. This is an act of institutional warfare, conducted with the precision of someone who has spent her entire life understanding exactly how power works inside those walls. And the financial consequences for a certain household in Montecito, California, are about to become very real. The woman who said no. Princess Anne has never been the royal who generates tabloid headlines through drama or spectacle. She generates them through volume. Over 400 official engagements a year, more than any other member of the family, carried out with the kind of relentless consistency that makes everyone around her look like they are operating in slow motion. She doesn't give lengthy interviews. She doesn't explain her reasoning to the press. She shows up, does the work, and moves on to the next thing. So when her office issued a formal communication addressing the financial relationship between the monarchy and the Sussexes, the tone was exactly what anyone who knows Anne would have expected. Clinical, direct, completely devoid of emotion, and devastating in its implications. The statement made one thing unmistakably clear. The British monarchy is not a funding mechanism. This represents something much larger than a dispute over money. For generations, the monarchy operated under the doctrine of never complain, never explain. Problems were handled privately. Disagreements were buried. The public face remained smooth regardless of what was happening behind it. Anne has effectively retired that approach and replaced it with something far more aggressive: active, visible, institutional defense. Her assessment of the situation has been described by those close to her as brutally pragmatic. She does not view Meghan Markle as a former senior royal navigating a difficult transition. She views her as someone who occupied a role briefly, failed to understand what that role required, and has since spent years monetizing the access that role provided. The distinction matters enormously because it determines whether Meghan has any legitimate claim to the resources she is currently fighting to access. Anne's position is that she does not. What sits inside the vault? The financial architecture at the center of this conflict is the Queen Mother's Trust, a strategic vehicle established in 1994 by the late Elizabeth the Queen Mother. The public tends to imagine royal wealth as a single, bottomless account. The reality is far more complex. Royal finances are distributed across a dense network of trusts, historical entailments, sovereign grants, and private holdings, each governed by its own rules, its own conditions, and its own gatekeepers. The Queen Mother's Trust was specifically designed to provide for her great-grandchildren. Its estimated total value sits at approximately 19 million pounds. The structure was built around age-based milestones, with significant portions scheduled for release when the beneficiaries reached 30 and 40 years old. Harry received a substantial disbursement when he turned 30. The final and largest portion was scheduled for release when he turned 40 in September 2024. That release never happened, because Princess Anne, serving as primary trustee alongside King Charles III, refused to authorize it. The power she holds in this role is not ceremonial. Under the terms of the 1994 Trust Deed, the trustees are granted significant discretionary authority. They can delay disbursements, they can impose conditions, and in cases where they believe Anne is exercising that authority to its absolute maximum. Her argument is straightforward and built on a foundation that is extremely difficult to challenge legally. The Queen Mother established this trust to support members of a unified royal family who would carry forward the dignity and service that defined her own life. Harry, through his memoir, his Netflix documentaries, his Spotify projects, and his sustained public criticism of the institution, has, in Anne's view, fundamentally violated those conditions. The money exists. Harry's name is on the documents, but the signature required to release those funds belongs to a woman who has decided with complete conviction that releasing them would betray the wishes of the person who created the trust in the first place. The jewels that belong to history. Beyond the liquid capital, the dispute extends into territory that carries even more emotional weight. The Queen Mother's collection includes physical heirlooms of extraordinary historical and sentimental significance, and several of these items have become flashpoints in the escalating confrontation. The Greville ivy leaf brooch is among the most contested, a masterpiece of diamond craftsmanship set in an intricate pattern of climbing ivy leaves. The piece was originally a gift to the Queen Mother from the Honorable Mrs. Ronald Greville. For Princess Anne, this brooch is not an accessory. It is a physical representation of the endurance and continuity of the Windsor lineage. The ivy pattern itself carries symbolic weight, representing growth, fidelity, and the kind of permanence that outlasts any individual lifetime. The Queen Mother's ruby and diamond collection carries a different but equally powerful significance. These pieces were worn frequently during the Second World War, during the years when the royal family chose to remain in London through the Blitz rather than evacuate to safety. The rubies became symbols of resilience during the most dangerous period in the monarchy's modern history. They were not chosen for their beauty alone. They were chosen because they communicated strength at a moment when the nation needed to see it. Anne's position on these items is absolute. They belong to the institution. They belong to the history they represent. They are not personal property to be divided, exported, evaluated for private insurance, or displayed in contexts that have nothing to do with the service they were created to support. Reports suggest that Meghan views these assets through an entirely different lens. To her, they represent tangible portions of Harry's birthright, items that should be at his disposal to maintain the family's global standing and support their commercial ventures. The idea of showcasing historical royal jewelry in the context of a modern lifestyle brand is, from a marketing perspective, obviously powerful. From Anne's perspective, it is something closer to desecration. This fundamental disagreement over definition, whether these items are heritage or property, whether they belong to the family or to the state, sits at the absolute core of the legal standoff. And Anne has made it clear that she will deploy every available protocol, every legal mechanism, and every institutional resource at her disposal to ensure these pieces never leave British soil. The legal collision. Meghan Markle has not accepted Anne's position quietly. According to multiple reports, she has assembled a team of elite London-based inheritance lawyers and authorized an aggressive litigation strategy aimed at breaking the administrative deadlock. The legal argument from the Sussex camp rests on a relatively straightforward claim. The Queen Mother's trust was structured around age-based milestones. Harry has reached the required age. The conditions for disbursement have been met. The trustees are overstepping their authority by imposing what amounts to a retroactive moral character test that was never written into the original trust documents. On paper, it is a reasonable argument. Trust law generally favors clarity of terms, and if the trust deed specifies age-based releases without explicit behavioral conditions, there is a legitimate legal question about whether the trustees can unilaterally add them after the fact. But Anne's defense operates on a different level entirely. Her legal team has invoked the breach of trust doctrine, arguing that every trust carries both explicit and implicit conditions. The explicit conditions are written in the document. The implicit conditions are embedded in the context of its creation. A trust established by the Queen Mother within the framework of the British monarchy for the specific purpose of supporting her great-grandchildren in their royal duties carries an inherent expectation of loyalty to the institution that created it. Anne's argument is that Harry didn't just step back from royal duties. He actively and publicly attacked the institution through commercial media products that generated millions of dollars in revenue from the exposure of private family interactions. He published a memoir that detailed confidential conversations with his father and brother. He participated in documentary projects that characterized the monarchy as archaic, oppressive, and psychologically damaging. In Anne's view, this constitutes a fundamental violation of the trust's purpose so severe that it justifies not just a delay in disbursement, but a complete disqualification of the beneficiary. The legal battle that is now taking shape in London will ultimately require the courts to decide a question that has never been tested at this level before. Can a royal trust be governed by the values of the person who created it, even when those values were never formally codified in the legal documents? Anne is betting everything on the answer being yes. The pressure building in Montecito. The urgency of this fight becomes clearer when you examine what is happening on the other side of the Atlantic. The Sussex financial landscape in Southern California is not what it appeared to be 3 years ago. The Montecito estate carries a mortgage reportedly in the range of $9.5 million on a property valued at $14.7 million. The private security operation required to protect the family runs approximately $5 million annually. Production costs for their media ventures, legal fees across multiple jurisdictions, staff salaries, travel, and the baseline cost of maintaining the kind of public profile that their brand depends on, all add up to a burn rate that would be unsustainable for most people, even with significant income. The Netflix deal, once valued at a reported $100 million, has produced limited content relative to its initial expectations. The Spotify partnership ended early. Meghan's lifestyle brand, American Riviera Orchard, is in its launch phase, which means it is consuming capital rather than generating it. The speaking engagement market, while lucrative, is unpredictable and subject to the fluctuations of public interest. Against this backdrop, the £19 million from the Queen Mother's Trust was not a bonus. It was a load-bearing wall in their financial architecture. The assumption that this money would arrive on schedule, that it would provide the liquidity needed to stabilize operations and fund expansion, was built into the projections. When Anne locked the vault, she didn't just withhold an inheritance. She removed the foundation from underneath a business model that was already operating under significant. The result is a financial environment where the Sussexes are now spending their existing resources at an accelerating rate, while simultaneously funding expensive legal proceedings in London to fight for money that may never be released. The longer the legal battle continues, the more it costs to fight, and the less there is available to fund everything else. Anne understands this dynamic perfectly, and there is every indication that it is exactly the outcome she intended. The strategy of infinite patience. What makes Anne's approach so effective is that it doesn't require her to win in court. It only requires her to not lose quickly. The British monarchy has resources that operate on a completely different timescale than a privately funded celebrity brand. The institution has survived for over 1,000 years. It has outlasted wars, revolutions, abdications, and every other form of existential threat imaginable. Its legal infrastructure is backed by the state. Its financial reserves are measured in centuries, not quarterly earnings reports. A private litigant challenging the monarchy's financial structure in British courts faces an inherently asymmetric fight. Every motion filed costs money. Every delay burns resources. Every procedural requirement that the royal legal team imposes, and they are imposing many, forces the Sussex camp to respond with time, attention, and capital they can increasingly ill afford to spend. Anne has subjected every request from the Sussex legal team to rigorous and prolonged scrutiny. Each inquiry for disbursement is met with demands for detailed financial justifications. Each response generates additional questions. The process moves forward at the pace the monarchy chooses, which is to say, barely at all. This is not obstruction for the sake of obstruction. It is a strategy of attrition executed by someone who knows that the institution she represents will still be standing long after the legal fees have consumed whatever resources the other side brought to the table. Anne has signaled through intermediaries that she is prepared to engage in litigation for as long as it takes, whether that means years or decades. Harry sits at the center of this, caught in a position that has no comfortable resolution. His wife views the legal fight as necessary and justified. The only path to securing what she believes is rightfully theirs. His aunt views the same fight as confirmation of everything she has argued from the beginning, that the Sussexes' relationship with the monarchy was always transactional, always oriented toward extraction rather than service. Anne's message to her nephew has been consistent from the start. You cannot enjoy the rewards of the institution while actively working to undermine it. The door to the treasury is locked with the same key that locks the door to royal life. If you chose to leave, you chose to leave everything that came with it. What the closed vault actually means. The physical heirlooms remain under permanent legal stay inside the royal vaults. The Greville ivy leaf brooch will not appear on an American red carpet. The ruby collection will not be photographed for a lifestyle brand campaign. The pieces that the Queen Mother wore through the most dangerous years of the 20th century will continue to be held as what Anne has always insisted they are: property of the institution, protected from any individual who would assign them a market value. The liquid assets remain frozen. The signatures required for release remain unwritten. The legal proceedings will continue to absorb time, money, and attention from a household that can afford to lose none of the three. What Anne has accomplished extends well beyond the specifics of this particular dispute. She has established a precedent that will govern how the monarchy handles similar situations for generations. The principle is simple and, once stated, difficult to argue against. Royal status is not a permanent asset that travels with you when you leave. It is a conditional privilege tied to service. When the service ends, the privileges end with it. The finances, the titles, the access, and the heirlooms all exist within the same system, and you cannot opt out of the system while retaining its benefits. For Meghan, who entered the royal family believing it could be modernized and reshaped to accommodate a different kind of public figure, the lesson has been expensive and unambiguous. The institution does not bend, it does not negotiate under pressure, and it does not release its assets to those it has classified as having violated the terms of membership. For Harry, the situation carries a weight that goes beyond money. The vault that Anne has locked doesn't just contain his grandmother's jewelry and his inheritance. It contains his connection to a history that defined him long before he chose to leave it. Every month that passes without resolution is another month in which that connection becomes harder to rebuild. Anne will not say any of this publicly. She doesn't need to. The closed vault says it for her. The unchanged signatures say it for her. The permanently housed jewelry says it for her. The message has been delivered in the only language the Princess Royal has ever spoken fluently: action, precision, and absolute silence, where silence is more powerful than any words could be. The monarchy has survived for 1,000 years by protecting what belongs to it. Anne has simply reminded everyone, including her own nephew, that this particular skill has not been forgotten. So now, for the question that needs your opinions: is Princess Anne right to freeze the funds, or does Harry deserve his grandmother's inheritance regardless? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.